Hello, thanks for watching another interview with the writers of the Midwest Fantasy Sampler. Today we're speaking to Anthony Wedgeworth, who writes the Altered Creatures series and has supplied the short story Centauri's Reckoning. How's it going, Anthony?
It's going awesome. How you doing?
Really good. So tell me a bit about the short story here. It focuses on a character of Centauri who relates to your sub-series Centauri's Privations. How does he tie in as a character to that series, and where does it fit in with the timeline and all that?
So the Centauri series is actually individual stories that, even though it's the same character, think of the Hardy Boys, or the I'm thinking about like even like the old Star Trek show and stuff. It doesn't always, you don't have to watch them in order. It's about a character and some of the events that he's done. Even though there is a timeline in the background, don't get hung up on that for the Centauri series. It's really a character that's much like a blend between Wolverine and Conan the Barbarian, and it's a fun, action-packed series. But this story itself is leads up to one of the books that will really get you launched into the series. If you like the short story, then you're going to absolutely love the series itself. Um, it's it's something that gets you kind of like a Andor, the show Andor, gets you ready for the actual Star Wars movies and stuff. So like Rogue One. So it's a nice short story that just gives you some meat of what's going on, and then you can launch off. So yeah, so it fits right in there. It gives you a little extra information about the series.
Cool. You mentioned Hardy Boys and stuff, and it's funny because literally yesterday I was in a used bookstore picking up Hardy Boys, Tom Swift, Three Investigators, Trixie Belden, and Nancy Drew. I picked up one of each to give to my nieces and get them started so they can figure out which series they're gonna like. Because those were things that I adored when I was a kid, and I don't think that those like standalone episodic series are done as often anymore. Like things
No,
are usually much more grand overarching plots, it seems, these days. And I used to love those standalone episodic return to the same characters series. That's fun.
and when we get into some of my challenges, like when we'll talk about dyslexia later, that will give you the reason why I did it this way.
Okay, nice. So you've written a lot in the world of Altered Creatures, 12 full novels, a bunch of short stories, anthologies, prequels, all of those things. How long have you been writing in this world, and what first brought you to it? What was the initial idea that kicked it off?
Okay, so back in '77, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. Right away when Dungeons and Dragons first came out, I was hooked, and I became a dungeon master, and I just fell in love with world building. And I didn't want to regurgitate what Tolkien did with elves and dwarves. He did it right. He did it great. I didn't want to compete, so I really spent time coming up with my own creatures, my own evolution, my own civilizations, how magic worked, and everything. And even after 10 years of playing, and our campaign finally, we all moved away. I kept making notes, and for 30 years, I made notes, and I had 5,000 years of history in an encyclopedia of notes that I had put together for this world that I wasn't sure what I was going to do with. And finally, I sat down. Actually, my mom convinced me, and my wife convinced me. Well, why don't you write some of the stories out of here? I mean, you've got all of these timelines and all these stories and all these basic outlines of what's going on. Write a story. So I spent 2 years outlining 6 book series, 6 books each, so 36 total books, and they all intertwine like a puzzle. So that way I could put Easter eggs in all of them for different series that haven't even been written yet. So when they all are written, it makes sense and it doesn't look like it was an afterthought. And so the catalyst was really playing Dungeons and Dragons, falling in love with world building.
People like you make me feel lazy sometimes. Like I'm perfectly proud of my own writing. I love my own writing. I'm not going to like sit here and crap on myself. But people who are able to put in the time beforehand and structure everything beforehand so that they have all these plot lines funneling together and creating the foretellings and hanging Chekhov's gun on the wall for themselves multiple books down the road impress me. Like I love that as an approach, and I wish I incorporated it more in my writing. And in my newer series, I'm trying to incorporate that more, do more early planning and stuff. But I think it's a weakness of pantser writers that you might be able to find things in your previous work to use as Easter eggs after you've already written them, but you can't necessarily plan for them that way. And being able to plan for them and structure in such a way so that you have those 36 novels funneling to one point, I would assume can create some really beautiful tie-ins. Why don't you give
It
go ahead.
also makes it really easy to write because you know where it's going and you understand. Don't get me wrong. We'll talk later about how I write, but not having to think about a new idea because I already know how this all fits in my head of in on writing in my encyclopedia. So it's really fun to make sure that I pull things in, and it excites me because I know what the Easter eggs are long before you do. Some people have to read it 2 or 3 times before they catch on. So fun
Nice.
stuff.
So why don't you give me a quick rundown of what each of the main three series is about?
Okay, so of the six that six series that I broke down of 6 books each, um, the first one is really Fate of Thork, and it started off. My brother did the artwork for the front. Started off in 2008 is when I published it. Then over time, I got a little more savvy, and we started getting, paid for artists to really beef it up, and that's the Fate of Thork. And Thork Dane is a character that when I first started writing, I was reading to my kids Harry Potter back, and I like the feel. I like the flavor of faster paced, character driven, 3 or 4 main characters that you can follow all the way through. It was family friendly, but yet still exciting. So I wrote a little bit with that style in mind, that I wanted it to be family orientated, but yet still on an edge of your seat. So if I always tell people, if they like Harry Potter and they can read Harry Potter and they're okay with that level of violence and stuff, the Fate of Thor, the Thor Dane series is done. All 6 of them are done, and you're gonna love it. That's that one. Now, then there's other characters like Santori that is in our anthology here, that is in the Thoric series. He's in 3 of those books as a side character, but he's got his own 6 books. 3 of them are done. I'm getting ready to publish a 4th one. That is a fun. I mean, I sit back and just throw stuff at him and just see what he can come up with. And in my mind, I'm watching this movie and I'm watching what he's doing. And sometimes he kept stealing the scene from Thor. So now I've got to really give him really some airtime, let him do what he wants to do. Great character, lots of fun. Sometimes I got to pull him back and re-edit it, and because he goes off on a tangent. But it's fun, action packed, questionable of where his ethics are. How far will he go with his morals? And then I have Tilly, which is my first female protagonist in the series. All of these are in the same realm. She's in some of their books. They're in some of hers. So they all interlink. She's got 2 books out. She's really, instead of a coming of age, the Santori book and the Tilly books, they're a little more adult. They're still family friendly, but the themes of them are a little more adult of reality of challenges that we all face in life. And she has 2 books out, and then I actually have a like a Goosebumps level. So there's actually a 4th series, and all 6 of these are done. And this is for kids that are more of a Goosebumps level read. They're not ready quite for Harry Potter. They can read this book, and as soon as they're done with it, and there's pictures and stuff, and after they read it, they could pick up the Thor book and say, "Oh, I know that character. Oh, I know that city." And it's not as intimidating to pick up a full, real novel for them because they already are in this world. They already know what's kind of what's going on, and what the different creatures and stuff are. And so it helps them introduce them to the. And I've had families read them together where the kids are they're reading some out of this book, the mom's reading some of that out of this book, and they can have conversations about characters that aren't even in their series because they're interweaved.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Like when I was younger, I used to read the Great Illustrated Classics, which were very, very much condensed versions of classical novels that had a picture on one side, light amount of text on the other side, and it was accessible to a very young child. But it was the
Mhm.
stories of Tale of Two Cities, Count of Monte
Yep.
Cristo, Robert Louis Stevenson, Invisible Man, War of the Worlds, whatever like classical adventure novel you could think of, or Little Women, or I don't think they had any of the Brontes, but like Jane Austen. Those novels reduced to an accessible level for a child so that after I read them, I was eager to get to the real versions. And so I
Uh-huh.
started going to the classics far younger than I would have normally because they already felt familiar. I already loved um, the Count of Monte Cristo as a character. I already loved the Three Musketeers, so I wanted to move into the full versions. And that seems like kind of what you're doing with the Goosebumps style novel, where
Exactly.
accessible to the child, get them hooked, and then they're going to be so in love with it that they'll be able to access the older stuff sooner. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed all the different levels of and I have 9 grandkids, so I test it out on them, and so it's fun to be able to have books at different levels and be surprised. People come up to me at Comic Cons and say, "Well, I have a son. He's a pretty good reader. What would you recommend?" It's like, well, what does he like to read? Because I'll have 8, 7 year olds that are reading, uh, Lord of the Rings, and then I'll have 14-year-olds that are struggling with The Hobbit. So
Yeah.
I really need to know where are they as far as reading to give them the appropriate book. But there's almost always one of my books that would fit with them. So it helps introduce them to my world.
Yeah. When I'm selling at events and stuff, one of the hardest things I run into is when parents are asking me, what age is this for? Because the answer is it's for adults. I write in a fairly classical style with fairly intricate language and stuff, so it's not like something that a kid who's enjoying Goosebumps is necessarily going to gravitate towards. But at the same time, my main series doesn't have anything in it that's going to like traumatize a child by reading. There's no like graphic sex or ultra dark violence. So I always kind of like try and craft my answer to that question to what the parent is saying about their kid.
Mhm.
And it's a difficult question for me. It seems like you have a whole retinue of answers for each of your different books that would kind of like make figuring that out like built into them in a way. And that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been doing this well since 2008, so I've had plenty of time to make plenty of errors and learn from them.
So this kind of leans into what we're just talking about, but the next question I wanted to ask about was your reading order of your novels and the age bracketing, because looking at on your site, you have like a suggested reading order, and it basically looks like the red string man meme picture, where it's like, well, this one ties into this one, and this ties back here, and it's all in these octagon shaped nodes.
Yep.
Um, and you also mentioned how it's structured to be consumed communally. And I was curious, what exactly would it look like in your mind, like the ideal reading situation if a family is reading your books communally? Like, how would they feed into each other?
Um, I would almost suggest that they each take a different path because they'll all get something different out of it. And the reason why I say that is because I really worked hard to not only just write the story, but I'm teaching your brain how my world works and how things are are involved with each other. And I'm giving you a perception by the end of each book of what that is. So when you get to the next book, you already have a perception and you move forward. And if you go a different path and start with a different book, you have a different perception. It would be like now when I was young, and we'll go to the thing. I grew up in Mississippi and California and Minnesota, and we lived in Madagascar, Africa for a while. I mean, I learned that it's perception of your environment that will help you decide where you were, what you think. My book series in general, in the back of every one, it says, altered creatures. We've all been altered by the paths we've taken. So I want you to be able to pick up any book and start there and follow that path. And at the end of the book, it'll tell you here. It's kind of like write your own adventure. At the end of each book, you want to go this way and follow Thork on this, or you want to follow Santori on this, and it actually will give you a different perception of what's going on. So if the family reads them in different orders, it will give good conversation of, well, no. If they read them all in the same order, they all have the same feeling. Oh, well, Thorke is the good guy because Santori, whereas if you read the Santori first, it's like you don't understand his background of why he's doing that. And so it creates dialogue.
That is super cool. So if I take it right from what you're saying, then any one of the books serves as an entry point.
I would say any one of the books, except maybe because the Thor series is more of a true arc. I would say his first, second, or third, but not the fourth. Yeah, fourth, fifth, and sixth. I would not start on those three. Any of the others, I'd say yes. So
That's
I have
cool.
a nice diagram out there with it. You saw with the hexagon that you just pick one and then you just start following it.
Nice. All roads lead to Rome, or in this case,
Yep,
all roads
exactly.
lead to books 4, 5, and 6 of
Yep,
Oryx.
and that's the case.
Nice. So I also know you've struggled a lot with dyslexia in your life. And I know very little about how someone works through that or how exactly it affects them. I know you it also said in your site, that you speak to a lot at schools and stuff, and that, overcoming dyslexia has been a big part of your writing journey. So if you would you care to like tell a little bit about how you came to work with your dyslexia or work through your dyslexia to make language and writing and books such a huge part of your life?
Absolutely not. No, I just can't.
Okay, never mind.
Next question. So I grew up, first of all, I grew up with a brother with 168 IQ. Okay. And he was older than me, smarter than me. And I already felt, three steps down. On top of it, I couldn't read. I struggled in school. And back in the 70s, they really didn't know how to deal with that. So they put you in the special class. And you get put in the special class because you're getting D's in normal and you're not learning anything. You're getting A's for watching videos, movies. And it was terrible. So I fought real hard. I actually went to the vice principal and then the principal to fight my way back into the normal class to work hard to get a D, just so I didn't fall too much farther behind. And we really didn't understand what the problem was. And everybody has dyslexia a little bit differently. Mine was I transpose letters and numbers. If I'm reading something, the ant, I'll read ant, I'll read, I'll mix those two. Sometimes I'll grab a word from a sentence down below and put it up in there for some reason. And so it just becomes a jumbled mess. So it was really a struggle. By the time I got out of high school, I barely read. I mean, it was maybe 2 to 3 pages an hour. It was terrible. And I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I mean, was I never going to make anything of my life? So I actually, that's when my mom suggested that at least I start writing. It wasn't these books yet, but I just start writing. And it was the act of writing, which I didn't want to do for a long time, but she convinced me. It was the act of writing that helped reprogram my brain. And it wasn't just the writing. Here's what we did is I would write something, and you have to have a very safe person that you could do this with. And then I would give it to her and she would edit it and give it back. And I'm telling you, the first year it was bloody red. I mean, she would mark it up with red of everything that I do wrong. And it hurt. Emotionally, it hurt. And I would write it again. Same thing. I would write the same thing, but I'd try to write it better. And I'd write it over and over. And for years, I practiced writing and for her to give me edits back. And this is before Word really could do a lot of this for me. Now I could just type it in and it would just tell me, you idiot, you did these 4 things right. And it's like, okay, but it was that act of writing and seeing what I did wrong and rewriting the same thing until I got it right that reprogrammed my brain to allow me to get to the point that now I can read really well. Not hundreds of pages like my wife can go through a book in 3 hours. It's just crazy. But I enjoy reading now and I can get a lot out of it. The one thing that I've learned though is dyslexia, which used to be my huge crush. And I used to get into sports. I was in football and basketball and I was in hockey and gymnastics and I was in choir and I was in, theater and I was in everything I could that I didn't have to read. So I stayed away from it all costs. But now it was my biggest strength. And as I got into other businesses, I found that they needed good people for writing for their business newsletter and all these. And I would sign up for it, knowing that I was going to be challenged. And I would write, and I would more I wrote, better I could read. And it was just this give and take. And I never would have believed it until I did it. And I'm not talking in a week or two. It took a year or two before I really noticed. But once it happened, it was like this light bulb. It's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And dyslexia gives some people the ability to force to see things that other people can't. I'm very good at puzzles. I'm very good at organizing things. When I see letters, you see a B and a D and a P, I see the same letter. They're all shaped the same. I see them at all. I can see them three-dimensionally and that they're all the same, which allows me to be a good architect, allows me to be a good designer. I've gotten to the point that I've been the president of engineering at big companies. And the reason why is because I have that ability to foresee things and visualize things that other people can't because of my dyslexia. So what I thought was my worst thing that could ever happen to me became my greatest strength and allowed me to capitalize on it and to become very successful in life.
That is really interesting. And I think it says a lot about other areas of life too, because everybody has their own struggles. And there's two things you can do about the areas of life that you struggle in. You can avoid them and try and focus on other things, things you know you'll do better at. And you can
Mhm.
do well at those things while like shunting this off to the side and kind of curtaining it off and just letting it be a weakness, but like hiding it so you never expose anyone else or yourself to it. Or you can really directly engage with it, and you're probably going to struggle more than anybody else normally would with it. But the amount of time and effort you have to invest is going to build up so much resilience in you as a person that you might wind up excelling. Like this is a much smaller example. But like in high school, I was terrible at math. I failed geometry, algebra 1 and 2. I struggled my way through, and that was all I did. I got to college, and I was like, I'm gonna be a math minor. I was an English major, wildly different fields, but I was like, I'm going to be a math minor, and I'm going to do well at this. And because I directed so much extra energy in that direction, I wound up with straight A's in my math. Um, I I became a plumber and pipe fitter, and in pipe fitting, it's not like super highly advanced math, but using a fair amount of trig and
Oh,
algebra and
yeah.
such in that. And I then went and taught for several years at the training hall, the math classes, teaching people how to work with angles and stuff and how to, calculate for cutoffs for creating custom fittings and all these different things. Because I was like, this is a weakness in my life, but I don't want to just like shunt it off and hide it from myself. I want to engage with it. And the extra effort, it pays off. And that
That is
happens in so
awesome.
many areas.
I love that story. That's exactly what I like to hear. I go to schools. I've gone to colleges and high schools and stuff and elementary schools, and I go and talk to them and I give them a little bit about my background. I really don't push the books at all. What I do is I talk to them about challenges that I've gone through and get them to understand that no matter what challenge you have, you can still be successful. You can still be happy in life. So figure out, if I can just touch a couple people each time that motivates them to step up. And I had one time it was a blizzard out, and I didn't know if I was going to make it to the university. I made it, and a bunch of kids made it there, and one kid showed up with her mom, and she was probably maybe 12, and this was out of college. And afterwards, after everybody left, she was still sitting there. And I went over to see, did you enjoy the presentation? She says, yes, I've been following you for years. And I've asked my mom to bring me here because you've inspired me to she was fighting cancer. And she was reading my books to get motivated to keep going. And it's like, I was in tears. I was absolutely in tears. So, to know that you have the ability through writing or anything to take what you've learned as a person and help somebody else, there's no better feeling.
Yeah.
It just to the core.
Yeah. And to see somebody with a different struggle than your own, and to know that you're able to give that person strength in their own struggle, whether it's something you've experienced or not, has got to be such a rewarding thing to be like, I'm not just taking the lessons I've learned and, passing on help for my particular narrow thing, but the fact that the lessons I've learned and that I've been able to put in my writing can then like inspire this child who's going through their own completely different struggle. I mean, you're crying your eyes out, but there's also got to be an absolute warmth inside
Yep.
to know that you're able to do something like that, you know?
No, I was crying the whole way home. It was I was so proud of her, and I was so humbled. I mean, just I never thought I would be able to touch somebody that way. And I've got people that and you and I've been at conventions together, but when they come to you and they have gifts, or like they have one guy put a tattoo of my book cover right on her arm. I mean, just to know
Nice.
that and they've asked me to come to their weddings and stuff, and it's like, why? How, I don't even know you, but they truly feel that they've learned, and they've somehow my books have touched them to that point that they want me to be part of their lives, and I'm just honored. I really am.
Yeah, and I there's a writer named Leif Enger who wrote Peace Like a River and Virgil Wander, were kind of his two biggest books. And he's somebody who I first read his work while I was in college in a writing class. And he actually moved to my, like, pretty much my hometown, like 8 years ago or something. And I've been able to meet him a couple times since then at different events. And it's somebody whose writing inspired me so much that meeting them, I felt like they were already a part of my life. And they say don't meet your heroes, but every now and again, when you do meet somebody like that and they turn out to be everything that you wish they were as people, it
Yeah.
can be so inspiring for a person as a reader. So, like, coming from somebody who I don't necessarily have a tattoo, but coming
Mhm.
from the reader side, talking, it's like I would imagine that it meant the world to them to be able to meet you and talk to you, and for you, it's like a great feeling that they care so much, but for them, it's also an equally
Yeah.
beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been very blessed in life. I think things, as much as when I first got out of high school, I actually considered committing suicide because I thought with my dyslexia, I would never amount to anything, and decided not to do it. And I'm very blessed that I didn't.
I feel like there's a lot of people who are grateful for that. I've met a number of people just at different events and stuff, like who have spoken well of you. Just you and I only know each other in passing, but your name has just come up, and they've been like, just a solid, good person is what they've had to say about you. So, on the topic of the dyslexia thing, I'm curious, how does it affect the editing process versus the writing process? Because I would imagine that that's where having that transposition of elements and stuff would become very, very finicky. Is it something that still affects you, or is it something that you've gotten past enough that it's not as much of a struggle? Or how's that work?
It will always be a struggle, and I've learned to accept that. Um, and I I can't notice. I can, but I often I will miss certain words, and I'll mix them up, and so it's been getting a collective of my wife and my mom and my kids sometimes to read my work, to clean it up, but then also I've learned to pay an editor. I'm terrible when it comes to where to put the comma. I mean, I don't know why my brain just doesn't seem to want to. I either put too many, four in one sentence, or I don't put any, and it doesn't make any sense. So my brain just doesn't want to work properly with that certain features of the English language. But there's tools for that. There's, word and Grammarly, and there's things that continue to get better. And I've learned, to accept some of that stuff where it makes suggestions. And I used to say, no, but that's not what I want. And to learn to say, you know what, let me read that objectively and see if it really does. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And there are times that you might even see stuff on there that still doesn't quite look right. That's because I fought to keep it in there because that's how I wanted it to sound, especially when somebody's talking. I didn't want the the dialogue to always be grammarly correct. I wanted people to talk like real people talk. And sometimes you get people that don't always, and I don't get into that, but you
Guilty.
get people that have certain types of dialogue. In fact, that's one of the things that I really work hard on. That you could pick up any of my books, open it up, and there'll be some dialogue. and immediately you'll know who's talking without it saying who's talking, because people talk differently. And I know that's how Gruen talks, and that's how Thor talks, that's how Santori talks, because they each have their own inflection. Sometimes I get editors always beating me up about having certain types of phrases that I use, but I want. It's okay. This doesn't have to be J.R. Tolkien. This doesn't have to be perfect. This has to be entertaining, and it has to be something that I enjoy and that my family enjoys, and hopefully my fans enjoy. This is a labor of love. I'm not trying to get a movie deal. I'm really enjoying the experience.
And I mean, at the end of the day, that's the like, why else would you do it? If you're, if you're not enjoying it, why pour your
So much
time
time.
and energy and blood and sweat and tears,
Yep.
into it? Because it's a lot of work.
Yep.
Um, so something we were talking about a little bit before the interview started was you were talking about doing a lot of different things with your life because why not? You enjoy them. And you're saying, like you enjoy your writing. Why not allow some of these imperfections and dialogues that you think are an accurate reflection to stay in there because it's what you enjoy? Also though, on your site, there it seems like you've lived a pretty crazy life. You said you lived in Madagascar for a while, you've lived in Minnesota, and
Yep.
I can't remember the other states, but there were several other ones. And you spent a week on the set of Friends. You performed at an NFL halftime show.
Yep.
Would you care to
Yep.
share just like what led you to this kind of wide-ranging life where you're just doing things you like?
Well, I grew up with a father that worked for aerospace projects, and so the Gemini project, Apollo. I'm dating myself, and he had astronauts over to our house for parties. I mean, we were already living. I grew up in an environment that all of a sudden, next thing you know, hey, let's take a job in Madagascar, Africa for a year, and we did that, and we were living around a very tribal environment where people would, after 7 years, they would take them out of their after they died. 7 years after they take them out of their robes and put fresh ones, and then parade them through, the streets, and we were exposed to all of this different culture. And then next thing I know, we're in Mississippi, or we're in California or Texas or Florida, and so I was constantly seeing all these different, exposed to all these different worlds, all these different things that people were doing, that by the time I got, we settled down, my mom finally, rightfully so, said, you know what, the kids should have some friends. So in Minneapolis, about third, fourth grade, we finally settled down. But I wanted to be exposed to whatever I could. I mean, that's why I joined. I was in football for a couple of years. We were second in state. I was first year I was a center, and the second year I was actually a quarterback, and then I was in hockey. I was in basketball. I wanted to expose myself to different things to know what it was like. I'm not a sports watcher. I don't watch football or any sports, basketball, anything on TV. I'll play the games. I'll be part of it. If my grandkids are playing, I'm watching. But in general, I want to. What's next? What life is short. What's my next opportunity? When I was in high school, we had the opportunity. We had number one choir in Minnesota, and we were able to get on an NFL halftime show, and we did a performance there. Then we went down to Florida and performed at SeaWorld and Disney World, right on the stages, and we did our skits and stuff. I did theater. I got my cousin was doing the lighting on the show Friends, and he invited me down. So I spent a week helping doing the lighting and stuff. Got a chance to meet everybody, played foosball on the table with them, and we had a blast. And people are people. You got. It's really strange when we first started doing Comic Cons, and I'd have Lou Frigno and have Ernie Hudson and stuff come over to my tables, and we would talk and we just have fun. And people say, "Oh, no, you don't." It's like, yeah, I do. And in my family, getting them to understand these are just people. These are just people with a different job, and to know that you can be involved with them and just have a good time and get a piece of the feel. In fact, when I was in Friends, they actually asked me if I'd want to be in a couple scenes in one episode, and so I was in the background in the coffee shop, and then I was in the back when Ross was lift and slide. He was trying to get his car. It was the episode where everybody turned 30, and so I got a chance to be on a sitcom. It was one of the bucket
That's
list items,
great.
It was,
And one of like the most watched sitcoms in history too.
yeah. So, and then George Wendt from Cheers, I met him at one of the Comic Cons, and we went and had beers afterwards. And I'm thinking to myself, Norm from Cheers just bought me a beer. How cool is this? Um, yeah, life is short. Get out there and enjoy it. It doesn't always mean that you have to quit your job, or it doesn't mean that you have to, you know, do anything radical. But sitting and watching TV or watching I watch movies with Star Wars and stuff. But life is short. Make sure that you're out there engaging and trying new things. If you don't like it, you don't have to do it again. But I guess I grew up with that kind of attitude, and it's never left me. I enjoy the search for something new, even when I've had great careers. Okay, what's next? I've got that mastered. What's next? Let's try something different. I've never done that part of business. Let me try it. Yeah, I have been very blessed of people giving me those opportunities, and I've taken them.
Yeah, such an admirable and healthy way to live. But when you say admirable and healthy, usually it's probably going to inspire thoughts of like drudgery and doing your duty. But like that's just an admirable way to live, to bring joy to yourself and to others. It's a good mindset. When my brother was in charge of or second person in charge of the apprenticeship for my trade union for a while, and so he would be part of the hiring process for bringing in new apprentices. And at one point, they had a guy who was, I think, 73 apply to join the apprenticeship. And he'd had a full career as an electrician and a full career in another trade. And he's just looking for that next skill. Like you said, like he had these whole successful careers. He wasn't like, leaving one with his tail between his legs or anything. It's like he had just had these successful careers and he wanted to learn a new skill set. And who
I
cares if
love it.
he's 73? He's still got years left to use it. And I think it's a good way to live.
Yeah, I love that attitude. There's always. I mean, I can't imagine actually retiring, because retiring to me would be still doing what I want to do, which is maybe I get back into. I used to be into art. I love love to get back into painting and sculpture. And my dyslexia brain helps with that a lot, because I can see what I'm doing before I'm doing it, and so there's a lot of stuff I'd love to do. It's a race against time, actually.
Yeah. So, speaking of diverse skills and crafts and stuff, another thing you do is you're part of a working writers mastermind with Jerry Shepard, T.R. Nickel, who is another contributor to this anthology, and Christopher Schmitz. What exactly do you guys do with that? Feel free to explore that group a little
Yeah.
bit.
So it's a great group of well-established authors. And what we're trying to do is create an environment for people that really want to make it into a business. You can do all the writing you want, make as many books as you want, enjoy the experience, have it as a hobby. But if you want to make it as a business and actually have a profit at the end of the year, and possibly even get to the point that it's a good money maker, it's not just an extra a couple $1,000s a year, but actually some serious profit, what do you have to do? What's different? So what are the fundamentals? Everything from how to structure what it is that you're going to be writing. What's your business plan? That's the first thing I ask people. What's your business plan? And they all kind of either deer in the headlights, or they either that, or they say, oh, well, I know what it is. Great. Do you have it documented? If you don't have documented, you're not following it. What is your business plan? Where are you going with this? Because I can't help you until I know what your business plan and strategy is. Is your business plan really to get a series going and focus on social marketing through social media for marketing? Is it are you looking at a time investment that is pretty uh, has a lot of latitude, or you only have 2 hours a week, and we got to figure out what are you going to do with those 2 hours a week. So it's a bigger picture of assessing somebody's business or helping them create that business plan and then helping them build on top of it. How do we, okay, now that we know, we work with people individually. It's not just, come on in and we're just going to teach you something. It's interactive. Where are you? How can we help you get to that next stage? Because all of us have been in at some point, sometimes I'll say, you know what, Christopher's better at that. I'm going to let him answer that. Or this one's really TR Nichols or whatever it is. But we've all collectively have enough knowledge that we can tell you, here's how you get past that piece. If you really want to get this done, you're going to have to give this up. Here's how you get the marketing, the sales, and those are two completely different things. Finances. How are you doing with any of your upfront planning? If you're just going to pick a book that you like and write it, that's a completely different model than looking at what is needed in the market and what sells and what you can make money on before you start writing. So the whole business model is what we're looking at, is saying people that are serious, that want to make some money in this business, we're not going to make it for you, but what we're going to do is say, okay, what's your business model look like? How can we help you build that? And we're going to work directly with you to say, okay, here's your next step. What challenges are you having? Here's how you get past them. And so it's been pretty successful. It's great to see new people come in and get a head start. I wish I had had that back in 2008 before I started making. I mean, you make so many mistakes on your own. You know how it is. It's, and you say, God, if I had only known, if somebody just had told me, don't go this direction because of X, it could have saved me thousands of dollars. I mean, I've spent
Yep.
thousands of dollars that have gone
Yep.
right down the tube. I don't want other people to have to do that. There's very little in it for me. I just don't. The satisfaction of knowing I saved somebody else from doing that. I've met people that actually have put a second mortgage on their house and spent $70,000 on marketing that they lost it all. And I hate to see that. I don't want to see anybody do that.
So
There's
much
ways.
predatory stuff out there.
Yep, it is. And that's the thing. They fall for this stuff. It's terrible. So we're here as a helpful resource. And I hope that I answered your question as to what we're really trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, I'm sure a lot of the people who would be watching an interview like this are going to be people who are writing their own stuff. And I just thought I'd give you a chance to discuss that a little bit because, I know Jerry and Chris and Tiffany and you, and you're all very competent people. Like, Jerry does her game writing for these different companies along with her main writing career, and she also runs programming for these different comic conventions and stuff. These people all have investments in different areas of the business. And then Chris has his own really unique thing where he has a Dungeons and Dragons themed bed and breakfast he runs, and he has his traveling medieval book wagon that he
Isn't that
sells out of,
cool?
these different elements that they incorporate into their business that really make them stand out.
Mhm. And I
Yeah,
want to tell you, when I first time I met TR Nickel, and we were at a convention in a mall, and we both had fantasy books out in front of us. And it's always uncomfortable when somebody comes over trying to sell them to your book when the book person next to you is selling a fantasy book too. And
yeah.
how do you compete? You don't want to compete. So the first thing that we did was we talked to say, hang on a second, yours is fantasy, mine's fantasy. Let's talk about this. Is yours family? Is yours, what is the differences? So that
Mhm.
way, when people came over, let's say to me, and I said, what is it you're looking for? And they say, well, I'm looking for this. I said, well, that's really TR Nichols. She has her books are more apt, to be a good, good read for you. And she did the same for me. And I'll tell you what, we both had, I think, $1,000 day that day, and because we helped each other. So those are things that we teach in there, is how, techniques of helping each other. We're not competitors here. Let's help everybody.
Yeah, and the closer and closer you get to in genres, the harder that becomes. But when you're able to make it work, it is really great, and you'll actually oftentimes make extra sales you wouldn't have otherwise because you have other directions to point them. Like, I did a convention in the Twin Cities where I shared a booth with an author who does sci-fi, and we are able to sit next to each other and have perfectly, enjoyable conversation with the people who'd come up. And if they lean more sci-fi, we'd point it to her side. If they lean more fantasy, point them to my side. Last week I was running that book wagon of Chris's for a Renaissance fair. And there were
Yeah.
three other authors in there: Douglas Van Dyke, Megan Mackey, and Chris's stuff. So we had four authors with all different kinds of fantasy, but all fairly different from each other. And I'd have people walk through the wagon and I'd be like, so what are you looking to read? Are you looking for something for the kids, for yourself? And if they're looking for something for the kids, I'd be like, great. Douglas Van Dyke has this Apprentice Storm Mage series, read through it. If there's somebody who looks like they're more looking for kind of the edgy, romanticy, urban fantasy type stuff, I'd be like, Megan Mackey's got a shelf right there, Cupcakes and Demons. That's not my bag. Mine is epic fantasy. So if that's what you're looking for, we got this whole shelf here to fit you. And over here, we've got anthologies that just collect local authors and people who were looking to discover authors. Just to mention that, I'd be like, okay, well, here's my stuff. But in addition, here's a whole collection. You can find a bunch of new authors. And like you were saying, those steps you can take to differentiate yourself while not trying to rob from your competitor, but rather help the reader find what they're looking for. They make the interaction so much more genuine that the people are way more open anyway.
Yeah, and it really is funny. I've seen this happen where, and I didn't do it on purpose, but when you as a customer talk to somebody and they recommend you should talk to this author, his books are somehow that rings a bell. It's like, oh my God, it's like they read a 5-star review and now they want to buy it. And a lot of times they'll come back and buy mine, probably because we're working together and helping each other. And they say something nice about my books. And I wouldn't have gotten that sale if that didn't happen. So it there's a lot to be learned about helping each other and supposed to trying to compete with each other.
Absolutely. Um, So we've been talking for a little bit here about your more business side of writing, about your lecturing and your mastermind class and sales tactics and stuff. If you were to address like a brand new writer, somebody who's just completed their first book and they're looking to make the best first steps they can towards making this a profitable hobby or making this a career, what are the earliest steps that you would like be? This is the best advice I can give you to set you on the right track.
So they've got a book, they've got it, then they've got something to sell. Okay, that's where they are. First of all, double check your cover. And I don't mean you, I mean ask other authors, because that's the first thing they see. If they don't, I mean, you've got an amazing cover on this thing. But if it wasn't, people aren't, they're going to click. They got, 4 or 5 second thought process. And no, 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 they're going to move on. It's got to have a good cover. That's the first thing you do. Second thing is you've got to make sure you've got some good narrative that they can read once they pick it up. Does the title sound right? One of the challenges that I've seen is sometimes the cover and sometimes the title does not tell the reader what the genre is or what the book's about. So think about, be willing to give up that baby that you've worked so hard on and say, okay, now I want to make money at it. If assuming that's what you want to do. And I want to ask other authors, what do you think this book, first of all, what do you think of this cover? And what do you think this cover is about? Cover the title if you want, and ask them. And I did that. And most people thought I had a game system or something because I was going like this. And they said, what is that, a dice or something? Is that some kind of like D&D game or something? It's like, no, it's epic fantasy. It's like, doesn't read epic fantasy. So I changed it. It was hard. My brother made this for art for me, and it was hard to do. It took me 2 years,
Yeah.
but I finally gave in, and my sales went up. So cover, title, make sure your words are all, make sense of when they read something, it's engaging, it pulls them in. And then the third thing is make sure you have a good editor. And I've gotten to the point that I hire now. I hire it out because you got to have a good, as much as your mom does or your sister or whatever does editing for you, you got to have a professional editor, because you finally got them to buy the one book. If it's not edited, they will never read anything from you again. So if you want them to keep going, the next thing is, my last piece of advice is write a series. And I'll tell you why, if they like the characters and stuff, they're going to pick up the second book and keep moving. I've got like a 60 or 70% on the first book to the second, but if people read the second book, I've got almost 100% to the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth.
Sure.
So I make one book sale, and I know that even though I might have left that Comic-Con, they're going to keep buying. I've got evidence to prove it that's they keep going. So get a series going.
Yeah, and there's no better feeling in the world than when you're at an event and somebody comes up and they actually did read your book after buying it the year before, and they come up to you and tell you they enjoyed it and why they enjoyed it and pick up another book. Because then you know I'm not just making this sale because I convinced somebody or because
Yep.
I'm a good salesperson or something. Like I'm making the sale because this person got value out of it and they want to come back. And that's to me the best feeling in the world.
Yep. When
On the
they come
topic of
running
covers,
over and saying, "Oh, you're here, you're here. Do you have a new book this year?"
yeah,
It's your heart.
absolutely.
You bet. Let's get this going.
On the topic of covers, something interesting. So I was going to just quick show some of mine. So I came into this so blind, and I stayed blind for so many years because all I was doing was writing my books and throwing them on Amazon and letting them sit there. It was just something I did in my free time, which I didn't have a whole lot of because I was in my apprenticeship and working full time. So, I went with what I liked for my covers rather than doing any market research or anything. And so I got a cover like this one, which can't see very well in the cover, but it is an absolutely beautiful oil painting up close. It is this wonderful oil painting by this super talented high level artist, but it is not a very good book cover because when you see this image on a computer screen, yay big, it reads as a big block of brown with a flash of yellow in the center. You can't tell what it's an image of, and it doesn't read my genre. Yeah, exactly. Like that reads your genre immediately. So this newest release that we're doing, the anthology, is really the first time I've been like, okay, I'm gonna really create
Yep.
a cover, not
Perfect.
because it's what I like and want to see, but
Yep.
because it's like what people expect to see. It
Yep.
reads the genre, the name tells you what subgenre it's in, and I really tried to change my mindset for this most recent one because it's no longer just, okay, I love this artwork and I want it to represent my work. It's like, okay, I want people to tell what it's about. And I'll tell you what, I went to my first event with this book last week and I didn't expect to sell very many of it. Sold out of them so fast. And it was so easy to sell this book because I could communicate so quickly exactly what it was. I crafted the idea of the anthology around the sales pitch of having Midwestern fantasy authors with their own series. Every short story links to their series. So if you're looking to discover new authors, here's a sampling platter for you. And because I went in with that mindset of I want to have a sales pitch for this, I want a cover that reads its genre, I want a title that tells its subgenre.
Yep.
All of those things have made it so much easier. So
Yep.
yeah,
I'm
just
very, very proud of you. I mean, it's hard to do. And people that haven't done it don't think, well, what's the big deal? You change it. You fall in love with that art or that feel, and that's what you want. And to give that up, it feels like you're giving up your kid. But reality is if you want this to be a business, what's the right thing? And you did it. And I'm very proud of you. It looks awesome.
so what do you have planned now? You've got your main series that you said was 36 books long eventually. What are you working on currently? And do you have plans for what the next few things you're working on in the series are going to be in the coming years?
So I'm kind of since the Thoric series is done, all six of those, I'm going back and forth between these two series and writing one story back and forth. And I like to, in general, write one story at a time. However, if I get to a point I'm not engaged, I'm just not, I will flip over to the other one and see. And a lot of times it'll start going and it'll actually inspire me. Oh, now what I could do in the other one, and I'll get back to it. So I'm okay writing two at a time with the understanding which is the primary and which is the other one, just so that I can keep something going. Because sometimes I need Santori to kick me in the butt to get the other one going, because the other one's a little more cerebral and emotional, whereas Santori's a little more brute force and let's get her done. And so it's two different types of storylines, and sometimes he has to do that for me. So right now, that's what I'm working on. Is every year I'm hoping to at least have one or two come out, and I'm working on both series at the same time. The Numbs Ashore View, that's the Goosebumps one. That one's done. Thorpe Dane, that one's done. So I'm really working on these two. When I get these two done, then there's the basically the enemy side, the dark mirror, the bad guy. He gets his series, so I'm really excited about that. And then the main, you'll hear in every book, there's every once in a while you hear the name Ambrosius, and Ambrosius is this figure that is talked about constantly but rarely seen, or he's seen in some scenes. He has his, that's really the ultimate series. And I really wanted to wait till the last of that because I wanted to get to my writing peak before I gave that one my time. I really wanted to know that I really could do this. I was really honed in on my everything from my pacing to my to my tropes to I had everything in line. So I've actually waited for the best for the last. So I can't wait to get to it because I've had it outlined for like 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And writing villains is always so enjoyable. So
uh,
I'm sure that writing those all 6 books, being able to like really get into that character, it'll just be a fun process, kind of like
it
a
will.
reward at the end of your journey.
Yep.
So the question I've been closing each one of these interviews with has been, was there ever a story or piece of media or something in your life that first put into your head that you wanted to be a writer, or that confirmed for you, yeah, I want to do this?
So um, there was, and I know it's going to sound really silly, but it was for me when I was going through some really hard times when I was in about seventh grade. And with my dyslexia, I had at that point an abusive father that I was afraid of. So there's a lot of things going on, and Star Wars came out. And I went to watch Star Wars, not just once, but that first year I watched it 48 times at the movie theater. And I fell in love not just with the mythology and the story, but that he could take me away, that a story could make me feel better about myself and change my thought and feel that I could overcome. And I wanted to give that back. And at that point, after a year of watching this, like somehow I have to do this for others. I have to tell a story that's going to motivate and energize somebody. And that's when I started.
Nice. That is a really good answer to that. Thank you for doing the interview tonight. Thank you for being part of the anthology. For people watching it, Wonders and Dragons, you can read a story about Santore and his fight with or well, not his fight with, but his meeting with a strange sorcerer in charge of the city. And yeah, I encourage you all to check out Altered Creatures and the rest of Anthony's work. And thanks. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks a lot.